Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study, and specifically Friday Morning GM with co-host Vas Laricos. Vas, how you doing?
Doing great. Still flying high from that big road divisional win last week.
Really makes the whole week just fly by, and the entertainment of just talking about this. In some ways, I'm really ready for the next football game. In other ways, I'm just basking in the complete glow of Baltimore sports right now with the Orioles riding high.
Absolutely. Great time to be a Baltimore sports fan. Ravens specifically, might have been one of the toughest games on their slate. Going there missing six key players and pull out the W. Doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. And, we need to talk about that in terms of how they realign this roster for six players. But I thought we'd look at the running back position specifically. And the Ravens having a lot of trouble keeping running backs healthy right now. Obviously, Justice Hill this week just went down with a turf toe injury. And, it's the kind of thing that can linger. Unfortunately, we saw it linger for years, really, with Jonathan Ogden in terms of his toe. J.K. Dobbins already lost for the year. Keaton Mitchell on IR until week 5, which was supposed to be plenty of time, for him to get over an injury. And now the Ravens kind of really need him now and not before. Melvin Gordon was activated off the practice squad this week. Do you see him having a bigger role?
Well, some of it depends on Hill. The reports are mixed whether he can play this week or a short-term turf toe, which seems a little bit unusual to me because that is usually a longer-term injury. I actually think Kenyon Drake, the man that was just reacquired and added to the practice squad, probably fits the Todd Monken offense a little bit better than Melvin Gordon at this point.
Yeah, and Melvin Gordon, obviously a guy who's had problems with fumbles in his career. Does this seem to meet the Harbaugh expectations of the offense a little bit better?
Right. So, last year Drake had a decent year for the Ravens, 4.4 yards per carry, 45% success rate as defined by Pro Football Reference. He's still 29 years old, so he hasn't hit that 30-year-old marker. For comparison, Justice Hill career is 45% success rate. And I wouldn't be surprised if given opportunity, Kenyon Drake would be able to take advantage of lower box counts that the Todd Monken offense is offering some of the running backs.
They certainly lower box counts both on offense and on defense there because they don't have the point of attack guy on every play. It was one of the really cool things this last week was seeing Monken be able to adapt very well to running out a football game. To me, one of the biggest points. By the way, we covered that extensively in one last thing with Slava Cooperstein. So I don't want to rehash it, but I was just overwhelmed with how well that went.
Absolutely. That was just a masterful job of play calling, I thought, all the way around, mixing everything in and coordinating, as you said, solving the issues. But the offensive line performance, I thought, really was a story of the game. As I see it now, I don't see the need to go out and spend either draft picks or additional cap space on a costly running back. When you look around the league, Gus fills in for Dobbins last week, 6.2 yards per carry. Jonathan Taylor is holding in. So Zach Moss, the former Buffalo cast-off, went for 88 yards and a touchdown, over 5 yards a carry last week. Then you had that horrific injury to Nick Chubb on Monday night, known as maybe the best runner in the league. Jerome Ford, a fifth-round rookie, comes in and puts up 106 yards rushing and a receiving touchdown, almost 7 yards per carry. So it really is just the production is dependent on the scheme and the blocking more than any other position on the field.
Yeah, I do completely agree with that. I think there is would be some value in the Ravens, though, if they're going to look around the league anyway. And they've been tied to Cam Akers and Jonathan Taylor, and they've inquired about them. And I think they need to do their due diligence. They need to drive up the price for other teams that might be interested in doing it, especially if they're the Browns, looking for a running back. But I think that one of the interesting things is they could still do is pick up an R or one cast off at this point in the season. Mm-hmm. Now, as the year goes on, all of the guys who have some really positive qualities at the running back position are going to be either on somebody's roster or signed for next year or injured. And, one of those three. So the Ravens need to really find somebody very early if they're going to do that. Usually right after camp is the time. And just think about it. If the Ravens had cut Keaton Mitchell, how likely it is he'd be somewhere else right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We saw that last year with Tyler Beatty around the same time of year. I do think that they can get by for a few weeks until Mitchell returns, assuming that Hill is not, a significant injury. He probably would have been placed on injury reserve if it was a significant injury at this point. So I think you lean on Gus, Kenyon Drake, and if you can upgrade that Melvin Gordon practice squad spot with a younger player, certainly now's the time to do so.
So they do. Let's see. Like, they're thinking through this a little bit. They have 2 practice squad elevations. Is this a week where both of them are going to be running backs then when they've done things? It kind of looks that way, but I'm trying to think. Sam Mustipher was signed to the 53, so they don't need one for him anymore.
The only other place they potentially could would be outside linebacker, depending on Odafe Owe's availability. I could certainly see Jeremiah Moon receiving a call-up because they also need to be cognizant of not burning Clowney out with too many snaps, as they have done in previous years with other outside linebackers.
Yeah, a very, very good point. Very good point. Clowney's off to a fantastic start, and you want to make sure you foster that, nurture it, and not overwork it. So I completely agree there. One thing we really haven't talked too much about is how each injury is really a significant blow to not only the quality at the position, which I think all fans, kind of understand, but also to the cap, because it's an extra player you need to have on the roster. And the Ravens have done some, frankly, creative and very cheap things in the past to try and actually not use every roster spot every week.
21, right? The 2021 season, They were with the 52-man roster for a little time there.
There you go.
It's that's the only time I can ever remember having the injury issues that extreme, coupled with the cap ramifications at the same time.
Yeah. And this year they have a normal amount of cap space to start the season. It was right around $5 million, a little bit over, it's enough to get you through the season if you don't have an extraordinary number of injuries. Now, they haven't sent a bunch of players to IR, which is something we need to talk about, but they have had injuries where they're having to add players to this roster, and each one of those, if it's a full season vet min guy, costs you about $1 million of that $5 million in terms of the cap space. So each one is not cheap. And, if you're not cursing to some degree at every injury, you're not really following the cap implications. It's nasty stuff. You don't want anybody to get hurt, period. And then you realize just how much this is taking away from 24 and future years for each injury that occurs.
Yes, definitely. That's something that's often overlooked, I think, by the fan base at large, and it does add up. They are in a position where every penny, pinching pennies, every dollar counts.
Now, you mentioned Malik Ham being a guy who, not Malik Ham, Moon being a guy that might come up at outside linebacker, and the Ravens don't have replacements coming at outside linebacker until at least week 5, with Bowser and Ham potentially both back at that point. By the way, I don't have any indication that either of those guys is necessarily going to be ready by that point. But
nor do I. I wouldn't be surprised if Bowser is still working his way back into playing shape. All summer, I mean, the knee just kept lingering and lingering and lingering all the way into camp. So he might not be until November. Potentially, who knows? Knock on wood, but it wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah. And a half season missed, obviously, with Tyus Bowser again would be an enormous blow to this defense. They really need him back, no matter what seems to be going right. Even playing a team like the Bengals, who's very limited in terms of what they can do down the field with their passing game, with Burrow's injury in particular, and the Ravens playing cover 2, they really need a player like Tyus Bowser to vary up their pass rush, to drop him from the line of scrimmage and make use of his coverage talents.
Disguise coverages, yes, he's definitely the key man for that. He, as well as probably Kyle Hamilton, the 2 key guys for that element.
Yeah, and in a game like this, you had Kyle Hamilton locked into effectively a cover 2 role, a half field cover 2 role, which was valuable. And by the way, the fact that we didn't see Hamilton except for on one very key 3rd and 11 tackle for 6 yards didn't mean he didn't have a big impact on the game. He did.
Yeah, definitely. For that position, sometimes the less your numbers called, the better you're playing.
There you go. We've heard that from who's the guy? Earl Thomas, right? Sitting on the bench. I'm a free safety. You're supposed to not hear my name. Arthur Mollett. If they don't make there isn't really anybody else to take over the slot except for him that I can see this week. I mean, sure, could they put a Worley or somebody else temporarily there to get through the game? I think they could, but I don't really see another option.
Yeah, so let's rewind. They signed Mollett before Darby, and he started, I believe, 7 games for Pittsburgh last year. So his advanced metrics are not spectacular. They're pretty much very similar to Pepe, to be honest, as far as completion percentage, quarterback rating allowed. Although he seems to be a little bit better coming forward, getting some tackles, sacks, the slot blitz, which we know is one of McDonald's favorites.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think you have to give Mollett a chance. You signed him for a reason. You kept him on the roster for a reason, ahead of Kyle Blue Kelly, the draft pick. And now it's just time to see what he can do. If you have to piece it together with maybe some safeties or maybe even Rock Yassin coming inside at some point, I think you can do that. But for this week 3, the one good thing is they don't necessarily play a strong receiving core or a team that's 3 deep with receivers that can really pose matchup problems again until week 9 Seattle, especially with Deontay Johnson, the Steelers man, injured. So they do have some time. And when Marlon comes back, I would say hopefully Mollett pans out. If not, maybe you can bring back one of Washington or Pepe. And if not, maybe you give Rock Yassin a chance there. And, break glass in case of emergency would be Marlon going into the slot.
Yeah, before I would make a move like that and moving Marlon into the slot, I'd really be looking heavily at the waiver wire. And one of the nice things is that slot corner is a place where you can find guys. Mollett, to go a little further, gave up I just did this on my calculator here. 420 yards on 405 yards on 42. I think it was like 9.6 yards per target last year. That's terrible. I mean, it's utterly awful. But it was a guy the Ravens gave $220,000, I believe, of guaranteed money. So they were a little bit loath to cut him at the end of camp. I honestly thought with the injuries and his performance last year and the emergence of Ardarius Washington, he'd be a fairly obvious cut. Not the case at all. And they kept him.
Yeah, and I think they like his special teams ability as well, career special teamer. We've seen it before. We've seen it many, many times before where a player comes from a different organization and you drop him into the Ravens defensive system and all of a sudden they're playing much better and their numbers are looking better and they're thriving. So I think that's really what you have to hope for here with Mollett. Fortunately, the schedule is a little bit softer as far as, not too many scary trios of wide receivers coming up.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's an interesting comment about that. I want to really review that and see who the Ravens have facing in these next few weeks. After that, but week 9, that does seem like a long period of time. Let's talk about. Is there a need to go out and look at the outside linebacker market at this point with who the Ravens have, or do you think they're unlikely to get anybody who gives them much more than Jeremiah Moon does for the meantime?
You could. Sometimes there are, edge rushers, older edge rushers kind of hanging around. I didn't look at that one specifically. I know just going back to the slot, Fuller is still available, but Harbaugh made the comment, we're looking for corners that are in shape and want to play, and didn't seem like there were a whole lot of them left when they signed Darby. So as far as outside linebacker, I could see a move there. I've heard some former colleague Spencer, who does the show with Jake. I know you had Jake on this week. He thinks that he expects a big move for a pass rusher at the trade deadline, which I'm not sure if that would make sense or not. Depends. I'd rather maybe reserve that one last lever, that one last restructure, and see where you really need somebody at that point. And also, I believe Malik Harrison's ability to have some versatility as a Sam is probably enough with Moon and Ham coming back, and hopefully always ankle's not too serious, where you can get by.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll take more snaps. He played 2 snaps this last week, looked really good on one of them, tracking down a receiver for no gain or for a short gain. I forget if it was 0 or 2, but real nice play on that right sideline. I do think he'll get more snaps this week, and I think the Ravens really need to figure out how to split those snaps up with Oweh out. And Ajabo, Tavius Robinson, Clowney, and Harrison not needing to overwork Clowney in particular, as you said, but also probably not overworking either of the two rush linebackers in this game, either of Ajabo or Tavius Robinson, because they're younger guys, and you need to keep those guys fresh as well.
Definitely. It is. Clowney was up close to 80% of snaps last week. I think it was at 78% off the top of my head, and we've seen that wear down away last year. McPhee previous years. Yeah. Judon previous. I mean, we just don't want to be in a position where here comes December and now you have, some of the toughest games on your slate and your pass rushers just don't have enough juice to get home when you really need to down the stretch.
Yeah, fortunately, not a terrible game for total number of snaps. So he played 44 out of 57, but that's the upper limit on what I'd want to see him play. And those games are coming, I still believe, where the Ravens are going to have higher defensive snap counts because of the offense just doesn't run as efficiently as it has this first 2 weeks. And we're going to see some either more turnovers or whatever lead to more defensive plays. And when that happens, you got to be even more careful about how you apportion those snaps.
Right. The punt return touchdown through time of possession and the snap counts a little bit out of whack. Sometimes you almost say it worked in their favor just slightly, but we just need to be cognizant of keeping those pass rushers fresh because we've seen it too many times. Even with Suggs down the stretch some years, and they said, "Where'd the pass rush go?" He had 3 sacks in week 13, and then he was blanked for the rest of the season until the playoffs came. So it happens.
Yeah. All right. The other
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month, thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
Concern right now for the Ravens is roster clog. Now we kind of were joking about, and not really joking because they might do it at some point this year in terms of them carrying a 51 or 52 man roster, but they right now have 6 guys on that could be on IR. Let's say Humphrey, Marcus Williams, who I don't know when he's going to be back, but I find it very hard to believe he's going to be back by week 5. So I'm not really sure why they wouldn't IR him at this point. Ronnie Stanley, again, don't know when he's going to be back. Again, I don't think it's going to be super quick. Linderbaum, same thing. And I believe his injury is supposed to be a longer term one. If it's a high ankle sprain, it's almost certainly going to be a 4+ week injury, I would think. Owe, we don't really have a lot of detail on his injury at all. That they say they're keeping it close to the vest. They've now identified it as an ankle. I just don't know what to believe. I mean, I think always the worst when they want to keep things close to the vest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been John Harbaugh's track record reading the tea leaves. You have to be careful about that. A lot of ankles, tough divisional game, trench game. It's tough. It's tough to have this many. Beckham may not play this week as well. I think they could be in a position where, we were talking about it last week. You have 8 total reactivations throughout a season, including the NFI. And if they brought everyone back that was expected to come back, that's 5 of the 8. And now you're also carrying these other, 5 or 6, as you call them, walking wounded on the active roster. You might have to play a game without your full complement of players that can dress.
Yeah, that obviously would be very bad, but they're almost there right now. Those 6, and let's do a little math here. You have 53 roster spots for the team. You have 2 practice squad elevations per week. So that really gives you an effective roster of 55, if you want to think about it, even those 2 guys you're putting in jeopardy by keeping on the practice squad. Then you have 49 activations to fill typically, and that includes OL8, who is number 48. You don't even, if you don't carry an 8th offensive lineman, you can't use that roster spot for anything else. And QB3, who is number 49. Now, there are teams in the NFL that are not carrying a 3rd quarterback on the roster, and that might actually be a place where the Ravens might say at some point, we need all these spots here. We gotta send Josh Johnson off, or we have to, release Tyler Huntley and hopefully re-sign him to the practice squad because of what's going on right now. But anyway, QB3 and OL8 take up 2 spots. Those are your 49 activations. Well, 55 minus 49 is 6. And that's the number of walking wounded the Ravens currently have. So you really hope not to get into the kind of situation. And the Ravens had this one time a few years back when Haloti Ngata was on the sideline kind of riding a bike for the whole game. Okay. And you hope you don't have a rehabbing player or a player who there's no intention to play him on the sideline for a game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just these cluster injuries have been tough to start this year. I do think the quarterback 3 would be the most wisest place to just grab an extra roster spot, reallocate it to a position where you need it a little bit more.
Right. And anything else they would do would be fairly risky. I mean, I did originally think that Arthur Mollett would last to the practice squad, but maybe DaCosta had reasons to think that was not true, and that might have played into that strategy. I don't think you slip Tylan Wallace by, but now at this point in year 4, Tylan Wallace is not the kind of valued commodity he would have been earlier, where he still had sand in the hourglass that was potentially undervalued to another team. So it could be a player like that is unfortunately cut and attempt to re-sign to the practice squad.
I think you need talent for special teams. A lot of these players that are injured are special teamers, and I could see New England Patriots, their receiving core is not anything to be impressed by. I think they would snap up Tylan Wallace in a minute if he hit the wire.
They are the team who would do that kind of thing. I'd be more fearful they do it ahead of a game with the Ravens, as they've done before, right, than doing it for that reason. But they would be a team,
right? Now,
another thing you brought up in terms of some of our planning for the show. Introduce the topic, please.
Yeah. So Geno Stone coming off probably one of his best games as a professional, and he is heading into unrestricted free agency. And I thought it'd be a worthwhile topic to discuss the pluses and minuses and potential decision-making of whether he should be targeted to be brought back. He actually had a void-year contract, so there's $600K deferred over the next 4 years. So there is a little bit of a way to continue deferring that. But, 7 starts last year, posted an approximate value of 4. Had that pivotal interception, obviously, in week 2. Probably going to have another 5-6 starts. I don't know what the plan is with Marcus Williams' rehab, but unless you're using some kind of harness to be able to make an open field tackle with a torn pectoral muscle, that's going to be a risky proposition. So, over the cap has their valuation metric, which I think they use a combination of snap counts, PFF grades, and market value that they've derived from other recent contracts. They actually right now think Geno is worth $16 million per season based on after the first 2 games.
That is high praise indeed. He's certainly played well, and obviously they're weighing very heavily on a 2-game PFF score.
Yeah, sample size. Yep.
Yeah, this is a. I'm going to try and take the Vas Larico's point of view here as well as I am capable of doing, because you and I have some notable disagreements on this. Mm-hmm. I love Geno Stone personally, and I would love to see him back on a 3 or $9 million deal or something like that. But the Vas thing you've always mentioned is that the mid-range contracts are where you get killed, particularly if you're giving them to backups and you're giving them to guys at non-premium positions. Now, I think Stone has a premium skill set in terms of being a free safety. How do you argue with other Voss on this?
Yeah. So my whole thing was depth is not a replacement for star power. But if you can manipulate the cap and use void years so you have the star power, then I'm in favor of depth. I do agree with you that free safety skill is a premium skill set, and I've kind of redefined what I believe is premium to display that. The question is, you can only have quality. You're not going to be able to have quality backups at every position next year, next 2-3 years. So where do you want them? And I think McCary as a left tackle is a place where you want one. And I would actually be in favor of bringing back Geno, letting Patrick Queen walk, going back to dime as a frequently used package,
right,
and then platooning Trent Simpson, John Ross, potentially Delshon Phillips at that weak side spot with Geno, because I think that is a place where it's worth having the depth. He's played well enough. Marcus Williams is still under contract through 26, and they're still pretty much upside down on it through 2025.
So the players you named at inside linebacker at the weak side spot in particular, who could platoon there, first of all, be a tremendous savings for the team as opposed to Queen. They'd probably pay in total half as much to those players as they might pay to Queen. You might end up paying $6 million, including $3 million to Stone and $1 million to each of the other three. Okay, but beyond that, you gain a lot of flexibility. First of all, in terms of how you want to do. So if it's not working out with Simpson in terms of him being a 3-down linebacker, and it well might not, at least initially, linebackers tend to learn coverage things later. And even though Simpson is a converted safety, I think that would be a legitimate fear, is that that's not going to work out. So you have 3 guys or 2 guys who could do it, but also it stocks your special teams core unit there with those 4 guys.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So the big question would be, what is a fair price point? I took a quick look at some of the contracts handed out. 2 safeties with the proximate skill set. Von Bell, a little bit older than Geno, but he's 29, I believe. Geno's 25. Mm-hmm. He signed for $7.5 million per year. Juan Thornhill, former second-round pick from the Chiefs, went to Cleveland for $7 million a year. And just for comparison, Chuck Clark was at $5.1 billion per year. So I think you're looking at $6 to $7 million for Geno, assuming he maintains the level of play he's shown throughout the early part of this season and last season.
So you're going the 2 games in 23 plus all of 22 that he played, and you're saying, let's take a look at that entire thing and see what. I mean, I'm not sure where I'd be if I'm Geno Stone's agent or if I'm Geno Stone. He has an incredible place with the Baltimore Ravens as the special teams captain, will always be valued here, and he's on the railroad tracks. It'd be really hard for him to trip over his own career in such a way that he didn't end up the kind of beloved franchise player like Anthony Levine was over many years here. I think that probably should be worth something to him. You see him active on Twitter. Obviously, he's very happy after having a big game period, but you see him active and talking to the Ravens fans. I think he kind of likes that. I would love for him to play here longer. I don't know that I'm willing to go like $5-6 million for Geno Stone if he's not going to be the starter. I think it's probably too much, and it may mean that he's one of the players that you have to make a heartbreaking decision about to let him go. If it's $3.5 million, if it's $4 million, and he's not, unfortunately, he's not really getting his money early in the typical sense. You want to sign a player early, you've got some divisible benefit on the table. You sign him after year 3, not during year 4. But since he's got to play out year 4 to really get paid after the season, then there is still a chance that he could do it. But he's, having already jumped out ahead of the curve in terms of his year 4 play, it wouldn't be surprised if there's a few whispers in his ear telling, just write it out, Geno. You got to do the right thing for yourself and find the best possible contract in your what is likely to be his one real big bite at the apple.
Sure. It's just it's one of those tough decisions, and I don't have a strong feeling one way or another. There's certainly benefits to it. I think there's a lot of benefits to having a third very capable safety that allows you to go dime. Just as it's beneficial to have a Patrick McCary who can back up, just as beneficial to have a Broderick Washington, who I don't necessarily think is a long-term starter, but he's probably your 4th defensive lineman going forward. These are the choices Eric DaCosta has to make. What positions do I want to have better than average depth, and what positions am I okay having worse than average depth?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And obviously every one of those decisions is going to be more critical this year. I want to have two things, but I want to go back to Stone for a second. It has been atypical in Ravens history, and they've been an exceptional selector of dimes during the entire Ozzie and DaCosta era. But if you look at what Ozzie did to pay for these dimes, he always went 6th round draft pick, 7th round draft pick, UDFA, or occasionally a marginalized talent signed for the vet minimum from other places. But it's mostly and that was really what Corey Harris was. A very modest contract when he came to the Ravens for 4 years. But they've been able to get by with basically paying nothing for their dime back play, which basically means they never had to pay too much for the weak side linebacker spot, period, other than when they paid Bart Scott on his second deal. So it would be my belief we're not going to see a first time ever $15 million 3-year deal for Stone, unfortunately, even if he deserves it. And even if he's almost certain to get it somewhere else. I don't think the Ravens are going to do that if Hamilton and Williams look like they're going to be healthy for 24.
Well said. Very well said. The only way would be to have Williams coming back to be your nickel, and then Geno's worth that money maybe as a starter. But very well said.
Williams coming. Oh, Hamilton, you mean come back?
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Did I say Williams?
Yeah, it's okay.
Hamilton.
Let's talk about one other player who, and the Ravens don't have a huge bevy of players that they can think about re-signing. Broderick Washington was really the big one. Madubuike is going to be way out of their price range, even though he hasn't really started the season particularly well. But the other guy who could be potentially a long-term Ravens special teamer / defender is Malik Harrison. And where would you be on re-signing him to a 2-year extension to his current deal, perhaps in the vet minimum plus a minimal bonus kind of level?
That's where I would be, a minimal vet min plus minimal bonus. And the way I separate Malik and Geno is Geno does have that rare skill set on defense that Malik doesn't necessarily have. So they're both core special teamers. They're both top 2-3 special teamer on the team, but you can't go out and find somebody with Geno's instincts and range. You can find a thumper pretty much anytime you want.
Yeah, I think the thing that Harrison gives, to be fair to him, is he gives you versatility at inside linebacker, outside linebacker, and they've really leaned on him as exclusively an outside linebacker. In fact, in my defensive spreadsheet, I have to decide where I put him, and I've just moved him to outside linebacker this year because I think that's where he'll get most of his snaps. Albert McClellan had that, and Jarrett Johnson had that. But the Ravens haven't had a whole lot of guys who were legitimate inside-outside guy. Kamali Correa was supposed to be that, and he wasn't. So
McClellan's really the one that comes to mind that really started games at both places.
Yeah, and he's a pure comp in terms of being that guy long term who was a special teams player too. And the Albert McClellan special deal was, the vet minimum plus maybe $400,000 in signing bonus every other year, and I think it's a good model to go for with Harrison. I think there is a pretty good chance, especially if Stone leaves. I think Harrison probably takes over the special teams unit, and maybe he's the personal protector on punts instead of being somewhere in the line. Although he may be too valuable as a bigger body to not be up there blocking. But good chance he's the special teams captain next year.
Yeah, I'd like to see Harrison brought back for the right price, which is not very much more than veteran minimum.
Yeah, outstanding, Vas. Always a pleasure to do this show with you. Tell folks where they can find your work online.
I am on Twitter at Vasilis Beatdown, Vasilis Beatdown. I am a co-managing editor and writer for Baltimore Beatdown, and I also have another podcast that live streams every Thursday night called The Ravens Way.
All right, outstanding. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, make sure you hit me up with a DM on Twitter. You know by now that those are always open. I've got some great ideas that have just come in the last few days, but I'm always looking for more. And in particular, there'll be a lot of opportunity on the bye week. Let's get an idea developed by then so that you're ready to go and talk to me about it when that comes. And I really appreciate all the new people I've met through that process. So for Ken McCusick and Vasilis Larikos, Thank you very much for watching, for listening again to this episode of Friday Morning GM.